Hey there everyone, I'm Michael, developer of the now defunct game engine known as Pandemic Framework. Making your own game could be a quite fun and rewarding project, and thanks to tools like Unreal Engine and Unity, it has never been easier to make your own game within just a few months, weeks, or even days. Those tools are nice and all, but it can be even more rewarding to write your own game engine from scratch, and it can also teach you a lot more about what goes on behind the scenes. In this video series, we're going to be doing exactly that using C# and .NET Core and SDL2. We're going to be writing something along the same lines as Pandemic Framework, so it won't be as advanced as Unreal, but it'll definitely teach you a lot, and I hope you guys enjoy. Anyway, I'm going to be assuming that you have at least a basic understanding of how to write code, but you don't need to be an expert to follow this tutorial. I'm Michael, and hopefully you guys enjoy this. Let's get started. Alright, so we're going to start off very simple in this video. We're just going to be simply getting ourselves to a Hello World program, but we're going to do things a little bit differently than you would in normal .NET Framework or .NET Core. As I said earlier, we are using .NET Core for this, but I'm going to set up a development environment that's a little different than what you would get out of just creating a new project in Visual Studio. We're going to do this through the command line, and there's a few tools that we're going to be using that you might need to install. I'll have links in the video description on where you can get them. The main tools you'll need are Git and DocFX, and maybe, well, the .NET Core SDK, if you don't have it already. Other than that, there are two things I'm going to highly recommend you do. They're optional, but I highly recommend you do them anyway. The first thing is, if you have the ability to do so, work on a separate hard drive from your Windows or Linux or whatever operating system you have. The reason for this is Windows Update likes to break your system. It's happened to me, it's happened to many people I know. You get an update and all of a sudden your computer starts behaving weirdly, or it just straight up doesn't boot at all. It's annoying, and if your code is on that drive, chances are you're going to lose that code, and we don't want that to happen. So if it's on a separate hard drive, you're good to go. The second thing I recommend you do is you create a Git repository. You can do so on GitHub, you can keep it private, or you can make it public, but this is just a place for you to store your code and be able to back it up even further. The advantage to Git is that you can actually revert changes if you mess something up, for example. Like if you introduce a bug and you just cannot solve it for the life of you, Git is going to offer you a lifeline and get you back to a previously working state. That's awesome. With that said, I'm going to walk you guys through how I'm going to set up my project, and we're going to be calling our game engine the Greenlight engine. And without further ado, let's do this. So I'm going to navigate in my into my projects folder, and that's where I keep all of my code. And then in here, I'm going to go engines. Inside engines, I already have a folder called Greenlight. This is my previous attempt at recording the video, but the audio quality was really bad, so we're doing this again. So I'm going to create a new folder called Greenlight 2. I won't be working in here in the next videos. I will be working in the original Greenlight folder, but just for demonstration's sake, welcome to Greenlight 2. So inside here, we're first going to initialize a Git repository by doing git init. After doing git init, we're going to tell it where our GitHub repository is. In my case, it'll be git remote add origin, and then this is where you type in your GitHub repository URL. So in my case, it'll be https://github.com/alkaline_thunder/greenlight engine. Once that remote is added, we're almost good to go. At this point, I would add a Git Ignore to GitHub, or to your Git repository. You can get them off of GitHub or many other places. I would recommend getting one for Visual Studio. We're going to be using JetBrains Rider in this series because that's just my preferred IDE, but of course, it doesn't matter what IDE you use. The Visual Studio Git Ignore is just going to help Git not commit any of the temporary and build files you might not want on your Git repository. It's going to ignore all those files, and it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. I have mine in my other Greenlight folder, so I'm just going to copy it in. Alright, and then we can add that to Git. And to do that, we do git add.gitignore after doing a git status to make sure that it's been registered with Git, and we can commit it. Alright, So that's basically it. Now, this is the point where I would push, but because I've already done this video once, I actually can't do that. But the first time you create a Git repository, when you want to push your code to GitHub, all you have to do is git push -u origin master. And that'll set up your code to push to the master branch. And then subsequent pushes will just be git push. And that's what you will run anytime you want to push your code up to GitHub. But of course I can't do that in this video because I've already recorded this video beforehand and done this, so we're not going to do that. Anyway, that's all of our Git stuff done. It's fairly simple if you've been using the GitHub command line, but not everyone has, so I just wanted to go over that. The next thing we're going to use is something called DocFX, and documentation is incredibly important for game engines, because if you're making a game engine, you're probably not going to be the only one using it, so you want to be able to document your code as well as you can, and as easily as you can. DocFX makes your life a whole lot easier by doing two things. It automatically generates a website that you can easily publish to any web server or GitHub pages server, anything like that, with all of your API documentation. And it also sets up a bare bones standardized folder structure for .NET projects. That's pretty important considering what we're doing is essentially making our own framework. So we're going to use DocFX to set all that up. We may not use our documentation side of things, but we're definitely going to use the folder structure that it sets up for us. After you've installed DocFX, which I won't go over, all you have to do is DocFX init. It's going to ask us a few questions. We want to leave everything default. So right now we're going to do yes. And then we're just going to hit press any key to continue. Press any key to continue, press any key to continue, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, and eventually it's going to shut up and generate code. And then it's going to create a folder called docfx_project. That's not what we want. We want all of our code in our Git repository, so we are going to move all of that code from the docfx project folder to our root folder. Linux, it's easy. I can't remember the Windows command to do it, but if you have Git installed, I recommend installing the optional Unix tools so that you can do exactly what I'm going to do. And that is mv./docfxproject/wildcard into the current folder. And then rm-rf docfx project. Pretty weird to see the rm command on Windows, but that's the power of installing those optional Unix tools. And now we have a whole bunch of stuff. We have an API folder, we have an articles folder, we have a docfx.json, which is sort of our docfx configuration, we have an index.md, and we have a toc.yml. We also have an src folder. We do have an src folder, and that's important. This is where all of our code is going to go. So to start that off right away, so we're going to do .NET new SLN. This is going to create a new .NET Core solution file which you can open in Rider or Visual Studio. And, well, that's all we need in the command line. We're going to rename it though, because right now it's called src.sln, but we're going to call it greenlight.sln. And then we're going to open it. And that's going to open it in JetBrains Rider. And I will see you guys there. Alright, so now we are in JetBrains Rider in our brand new Greenlight solution file. And we have 0 projects, and that is kind of bad. Let's create some projects. We're going to create 2 new projects. We're going to first create a class library, and we're going to call this greenlight.core. This is going to hold all of our engine API and all of our functionality. It is basically going to be our entire game engine. This is going to hold all of our functionality, like I said. It's going to be our engine's API. When we create a game, it's going to link with this library, and it's going to use this library to, well, create the game. The next thing we're going to create is not a breakpoint. I'm just adjusting my window, and I did that by accident. We're going to create a new console application project. You might be thinking, well, wouldn't that be up to the game? Well, in my previous engines, that would be the case. The game would worry about initializing the engine. But that's sort of backwards. We want our engine to be initializing the game, and we want the engine to worry about initializing itself. The game shouldn't have to worry about that type of boilerplate. It just interact with the engine, and that's that. Think of how Unity, where you create a Unity project and all of your code just works with Unity's existing API, and Unity takes care of, well, running your level and getting the game window and everything set up for you. That's the type of approach we're going to do in this video. And we're going to create a project that's a console application called Greenlight. And we could even create a desktop application if we wanted to, but I'm going to leave it as a console app for now, and we're going to see why. A lot of this series is going to take place in the console. It's going to be a little while before we get to rendering graphics on screen, so it's pretty important we have a console application. This executable is going to take care of initializing our game engine. And now we're going to actually reference these two projects together. So I'm going to right-click the Greenlight project, and we're going to reference greenlight.core, because we need access to our game engine's library in order to initialize our game engine. And that's that. So with that in place, we should be able to automatically run our program, and it'll hopefully build success. Hello world. That's awesome. But we're not done yet. With our projects created, we're actually going to go ahead and add some very quick boilerplate code. Or not boilerplate, we're actually going to be starting off our engine framework. We're going to create, in the next video, something called an application layer. That's basically the part of the engine that's responsible for initialization and actually running the game loop and tearing things down when the user quits the game. It's the most important, it's the core of the engine, so it's very important that we get that done early on. But we're actually going to create an app class right now that is eventually going to be that application layer. And that's awesome because we already have a class 1 in our game engine library. We're going to rename that to app. We can do that with JetBrains Writer simply by right-clicking, hitting refactor this, and rename, and then typing in app for our class name. Visual Studio has a similar functionality, so you can use that if you want. But now that we have an app class, we're gonna make it iDisposable, which is an interface in the system namespace. And the iDisposable namespace, or the iDisposable interface, basically means that this object is something that we need to take care of disposing. Later on, we're going to be getting into SDL2, and SDL2 is a C library, not a C# library. And that means we have to take care of actually tearing down SDL and freeing up the memory. And that's a perfect use of iDisposable, because what'll happen is when our engine actually gets shut down, this dispose method is going to be called, and that's going to be where we tear down all of our SDL resources and free up the memory. But for now, we're going to simply log to the console that Greenlight is down. Next, we're going to add a run method. And this is going to be the method that starts it all. The very first method that the game ever calls when we run the executable. And this is where we're going to implement our hello world. That's where we're simply going to end things off as far as our app class goes in this video. We're going to go back to our actual game engine executable file, and inside here we're going to write 2 lines of code. First, we're going to do using var app equals new app. And it's already going to add the namespace for our greenlight.core. And this basically creates a new instance of our application layer. And it makes it so that when the main method ends, it'll actually dispose of the app. It'll call that dispose method from before. And we'll see that if we run the game right now, or run the engine. You're going to see that it actually prints green light is down to the console. That means that dispose method is being run. That's awesome. That's perfect. We're going to be able to easily tear down SDL as soon as the game exits. But we're obviously not running the game yet, so we're going to call the app.run method. And then that we should see in the console, hello world, green light is down. So we create a new instance of our app, we run the app, which right now prints hello world, and then as soon as the app stops running, we immediately start tearing it down. That's awesome. That's all we need right now. That is our game engine. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. In the next episode, we're going to be doing the application layer and actually writing a game loop and getting an SDL window to display on screen. And then in the video after that, we're going to get into console logging and some of the more debugged stuff that is very important to have in a game engine. Anyway, I hope you guys look forward to that, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I know it's very basic, this one, but getting a development environment set up is very important. With that said, that ends off this video right here. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I cannot wait to make the second episode. I've been Michael, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.